Good morning. I'm Brigid and welcome to Morning Coffee with Brigid. This is it's a very hot. We're already getting into the very hot weather. The weather outside isn't too bad. You might notice I have no makeup on today. Good morning, Melissa. Welcome to this very hot day because I know you're roughly geographically we're in the same area of the country. So, it's very hot today. As you can see, I'm already it's not too bad outside right now, but I have all the windows closed now because all the birds and everything. And last night the crickets were really loud. I mean, they sounded like they were like right on my roof, doing their little, rub their legs or whatever it is to make that sound. But it just felt like that's all I could hear. I was just like, oh my gosh, they're so loud. But yeah, this is like a no makeup day for me, and I'm just, I imagine it's going to be this way all week because we've got some excessive heat warnings going. So it's going to be interesting, exciting. I also went outside yesterday, and I have a patio in the back it's got not traditional red brick. It's more like the square red bricks, and I've been trying to Jenny was kind enough to lend me a power washer, so I want to actually use that and get that whole thing power washed because it's gotten to be filthy over the years. But I had to actually pull weeds out of it first. I know it's like weird. I think it's weird like weeding your driveway or weeding your patio and stuff. It happens. So I was working on that yesterday. It took me about an hour, and then I had a whole bunch of stuff like vines and stuff that are growing in and had to be cut back along the front of my yard. So I was outside working for about 2 hours yesterday, and my body, even though I work out, my body's really feeling it today. It's like I'm sitting up right now, but it's like, I just find like my eyes just keep kind of going in and out because I'm like, okay, I need a day of some Reiki therapy, self therapy, and just laying down and maybe relaxing a bit today. I do have a few little errands to run. And oh my goodness, just as I'm talking, I wish I could show you, there is a mama deer with two little babies that is now walking, two fawns and a mommy, walking right along the back edge of my neighbor's property, and they just kind of passed in front of my window. So that's interesting. Now they're kind of hidden behind the tree, but that was just interesting that yesterday, actually Father's Day, I had gone to my mother's house and with my sister and her husband. And I know, it's so sweet, isn't it? And what we saw was a mama deer, and the baby was actually underneath mama, like suckling on her, on her teats. And maybe I've seen that once before, but it was just in somebody's yard. They were just standing there, and the baby was nursing on mommy. So I was like, oh my gosh, that's so cute. So it was, So I've seen a couple of these mother-child things. Might be a synchronicity of some kind. But anyway, so this morning, because I'm battling the body aches and pains. Sometimes talking actually does help. I sometimes actually feel the more my mouth moves for some reason. I don't know if it adjusts something that goes on in my head or whatever. But So it's sometimes that actually helps. But I mean, I thought today I was going to probably stick a little bit more to maybe just doing some readings and stuff today for the live stream. But I did get a couple of messages that came in, and I did kind of get this sense that there's at least one topic that even if I don't talk about it for very much, that I should talk about at least a little bit. I have an angelic message that came through as well this morning. I use my Enochian. I have an Enochian deck that I'm working with now, and again, it's not even finished. I was on the phone with Jenny yesterday, and I said to her, I said it's not done. It's only got 120 cards, and she's laughing at me. She's like, it's not done, but it has 120 cards. And I said, well, it's because that's just the nouns. I'm trying to have things to kind of make sentences. I have nouns and pronouns, and then it's like I need verbs, I need a couple of, some other things that I want to be able to fit in there. But how like I said, I think I had said the other day, it's kind of like talking to somebody who speaks a foreign language, and you may have your phrase book, and you may have you kind of manage to communicate and get your point across, even though you don't have a full vocabulary. So it's kind of like that. But the words that came out today were Iad, Katmi, Gali, Gnatab, Halman, which in Enochian basically has to do with the god. So basically, the god power is gathering is basically how that roughly reads. And then the other part of it is that government's age. So I don't know. I feel like that kind of fits in with some of the other messages that they're saying. So it's almost like there's certain changes that are brewing. And like I don't know. I don't feel like it's an ominous message. I feel like it's just saying, there's powerful change that's coming in. Like our way of doing things might be changing. There's a kind of a numinous power that may be affecting things more than we realize. Because a lot of people have spoken to me about feeling either very drained lately or being excessively, just feeling excessively challenged in a lot of different ways. So I want to, my feeling is, okay, with all these challenges, I feel like it's just kind of saying, well, there's something that's gathering. There's a change that's coming in, and I don't feel that it's I don't feel like it's a negative thing. I don't feel like we're going to be moving backwards. In some way, this is going to be a move forward, but it might be something different from what we've done before. So anyway, I got that message this morning. But the other thing that they came up that they wanted me to talk about was the consciousness card that came up in the deck. Okay, this is a Buddha consciousness card. And when I got this card, I thought, okay, because normally this is an Ace of Swords card, and if like I was just taking the deck and it just flipped out at me, and I said, that was the thing. I said, is this what you want me to talk about today? I was kind of like, yeah, that's the thing. And this talks about consciousness in a different way. I mean, we can talk about consciousness as, I see and I understand something very, very clearly. But this is a consciousness that it goes a little bit beyond that. It's more of the consciousness that I was talking about when we have, how can I put it? It's the consciousness that we have when you know without having to evaluate or understand. I've talked a bit about that. And it's more a knowing that the way that it was expressed here, because I went back and looked at the book, they said that the person will make the move from the known, for the first time, not into the unknown, but into the unknowable. Okay? And when they say it's unknowable, it means it's something that can't be apprehended by the mind. So it's interesting. They're calling it consciousness, but it's like a clarity and awareness that you have of something that your mind can't actually comprehend. And we talk about it, and the rest of the explanation of this card kind of goes in and out of talking about the way in which worlds come into consciousness and out of consciousness. And I was reminded of a story. And the story was, Joseph Campbell actually tells it in The Power of Myth. And I'm trying to remember which story it was. It's one of the episodes. I can't remember if it's The Message of the Myth. There was one other one that I tended to show my students. I can't remember. But anyway, because there's different episodes within that. And this was one about the god Indra in Hinduism. And Indra is known for, he's like Yahweh or like Jupiter or Zeus or Lugh in the Celtic. These are gods who are known for using the lightning bolt. Okay, they're storm gods. I mean, initially that's what they were. That's what their function was. And it's interesting that the god of storms and lightning often becomes the king of the gods, or is considered to be the chief god, or as we've developed in Western culture, the only god. And Indra is, of course, the version of this god in the Hindu pantheon, and he is, of course, the king of the gods. But he's conceived of, it's interesting because I always thought Indra and Zeus kind of had a very similar kind of a way of being looked at. And Indra because he's somebody who's, he's the king of the gods and he's gotten his position for a reason, but he's also comes across as very, very flawed in a lot of ways, in the same way that we might think about Zeus, like cheating on his wife all the time and stuff. And actually, Indra did cheat on his wife, who was Indrani, who is one of the, or Indri as she's sometimes called, who's one of the, what they call the 8 matrikas. And the story is that Indra, of course, he basically drops his thunderbolt on this demon. And what is it? Is it Vritra? I can't remember. I remember the name of the demon. I think it's something like that. Or the Ashura, who is basically dries up all the world oceans and doesn't let any of the waters flow. So he basically takes his lightning bolt, he throws it at this demon and destroys him, and then all the waters of the world are released. And this is the accomplishment that makes him the king of the gods. Or as Joseph Campbell would say, what a good boy am I. I did this thing, look how great I am. And so when he becomes the king of the gods, he decides he's going to have a palace built like no other palace. And so he calls on Vishvakarman, who's the architect of the gods. and tells him, draws up the plans and says, okay, this is what I want. So Vishvakaman goes about having builders build this great palace. But every time it's something is built, Indra's not satisfied. He wants it bigger. He wants it better. He's like, no, it has to be a palace worthy of someone such as myself. Okay, you might see where this is kind of going. And so Vishvakaman keeps doing this, and then he feels like this is going to be endless. Like, we're going to be building until, I'll be building into eternity at this rate. So he gets very concerned, and he goes to Brahman, okay, the creator god, and he says to him, Indra's dad, what are we doing here? And Brahman just says to him, I'll take care of this. So one day at the gates of this palace, there's a little blue boy, colored blue in color, like dark blue, very beautiful, who appears at the palace gates. And everybody goes out to look at this blue boy. He's beautiful, don't know where he's come from. And so he's admitted to the palace, and Indra greets him and says, young man, welcome. What brings you to my palace? And he just says, well, he says, I was told that that you're building a palace as no other Indra has built before. He said, and he says, so I decided to come and see for myself, and it's true. Your palace is not, there's no Indras before you who ever built a palace like this one. And Indra looks at him and says, young man, what do you mean other Indras? And the young man kind of smiles at him and says, don't ask unless well, actually, he first says to him, and as he's saying this, I'm missing a piece here. A whole army of ants starts to come walking in behind him, and the boy looks at them and laughs. And Indra then looks at him. His hair kind of like stands on end a little bit, and he's like, what do you mean? And the boy goes, don't ask unless you want to be hurt. And Indra said, I ask, teach. So the boy points to the ants, and he goes, Indra's before you, Indra's after you. He says, as the universe comes into being, there's a lotus that grows on the navel of Vishnu. The universe is the dream of Vishnu. As the lotus opens, another Brahman appears, a creator. The world is created, and then the world exists. Eventually, it's destroyed. Vishnu wakes up. It's destroyed. The lotus goes back in, and then another one opens up, and another universe comes into being. He says thousands of universes come in and out of being. And every one of them has an Indra who drops his thunderbolt on Vitra and says, what a good boy am I. And then he goes down, and basically he's saying all the ants were the Indras before him because he started to believe this idea. In a way, the Gnostics have a very similar idea when they talk about Yaldabaoth, which is their version of Yahweh. He's a god that is created allegedly sort of out of an imbalance. Sophia decides, she becomes infatuated with the Plemera, which is kind of this vision of God that's very, it's very, it's almost like that's almost the unknowable aspect. And normally the universe was being created in pairs, what they called aeons. They were created in pairs in this way of thinking. And, but she decides not to create in pairs. She creates by herself. And what she creates is Yaldabaoth, who is the god who's considered to have his head in the clouds. And Yaldabaoth, because his head is in a cloud, he thinks he's the only one. There's nobody else. There's no other gods. There's nothing else in the universe except him. So they say Yaldabaoth creates this world, and Yaldabaoth's the one who creates Adam and Eve. And in this version, the serpent is actually Sophia, because she's coming to tell them that, no, this is not all that there is. And so there becomes this whole idea of the battle between Yaldabaoth and what they call the demiurge, and and all of what they call the archons, the kind of officials or emissaries of this deity that try to fight against anybody who has consciousness of the greater whole. Again, because he's simply deluded. He has his head in the clouds and thinks he's the only one. So there's a similarity there if we look at the idea of Indra as believing he is the greatest of the gods and has done the greatest thing. Now we can talk about it in terms of hubris or pride, in terms of that way of looking at things. But I think even more fundamentally than that, it's the consciousness of just how big everything is. It's the consciousness of the fact that, they did. And also, interestingly, when we think about this multiverse idea, which has come up over and over again, and the idea that we may be existing across multiple lifetimes, that there may be dozens and dozens, we're calling them parallel universes, but the idea that we could be existing in all of these different spaces. And good morning, Sam. Just getting into the subject of, I was just talking about the subject of consciousness today. That was our card. But I'm talking about the consciousness of the fact that there's so many other realities. So this card is really about not moving into the unknown, but moving into the unknowable, which is a different kind of consciousness. It's consciousness of the fact that what we're dealing with here is not all that there is, but you're kind of moving into a space where things are. There is a trilogy called Oversoul 7. Is that who's written that? Is that a book? Is that a book series? Is that a movie series? I don't know who's. I haven't read that one. If it's a book, I haven't seen it. That sounds interesting. Yeah, it sounds to me it's a book. Okay, that's interesting. And I guess what you're saying is that it kind of falls along that same concept. That's what it is. Because it sounds like it would, just from the title alone. It's this idea that we are. It's exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah, and that's probably where it comes out of. It probably actually comes out of a Gnostic way of thinking. There's a lot about the Gnostic way of thinking, actually, and when I say Gnostic, I say that advisedly. It's a word a little bit. Kind of like, what was the other one I was thinking of? Orphic or something like that. Or almost like New Age. It's a term that actually covers a lot of different ways of thinking. But Gnostic Christianity, we always tend to think of it as just being like Valentian or Marcion. There's like one or two different varieties because the Christian apologists always talked about one or two different guys. But there wasn't just one or two different guys, who were considered Gnostics, and they didn't always all agree with each other. But in fact, on my Catonia Conversations, I have a conversation with Daniel Hanley, who actually I consider to be an expert in Gnosticism, and so he talks to me about some of these different, particularly as they relate to the feminine, but he talks about those different permutations. And it's a very Gnostic idea. The other Gnostic idea that seems to come about a lot recently connects to, it's Philip K. Dick. If you ever read any of his science fiction, speaking of books, Valis. And I'm sure I've mentioned this before, so sometimes I feel I never know where I've mentioned things, so I don't know if I'm repeating myself on this one, so apologies if I am. But Valis is it's a science fiction novel, and the premise of it, at least part of the premise of it, is very, very interesting because the knowledge that comes out of Valis, which is this satellite, okay, is that the phrase is the empire never ended. And the idea is that that the Roman Empire never ended. So the idea is that the conditions of the Roman Empire, which we think about, first of all, we're talking about a lot of religious diversity. Christianity being just one of the multiple religions. And in fact, there was a lot of what they call syncretism going on. So Christianity has picked up a lot of the attributes of Bacchic worship or Dionysian worship. In fact, some people say Jesus is modeled on Dionysus because he was considered to be a savior figure in those cults. I mean, which sounds weird when you think about the fact that he's the god of wine and orgies and things like that. But really, it's a lot more complex than that because Dionysus is the first god that allows you to have a direct experience of God, what they call theos, the idea that you can directly experience or communicate with the god. And that's something that the Christians often talked about. You don't need to have that. That's why they didn't like the Gnostics, because the Gnostics idea that you had to achieve gnosis, this knowledge that one would have. And here they're saying, well, you don't need gnosis. I mean, that's just elitist. You don't need that. But Christianity's kind of turned into that because the real meat of Christianity, the real knowledge that is transformative, is something, at least within the context of Catholicism, that tends to be kept for clergy, and particularly monastic clergy, particularly like the Jesuits. When I have either taken classes with Jesuits or when I have been in like monastery or convent libraries looking at the kind of material that the monks and the nuns are learning from and reading, I'm reading about a Christianity that's way different from the one that I learned. And the one that I'm reading about really resembles Buddhism in a lot more ways. And the thing is, though, but I have been told, well, that's only for special people. So I'm like, well, you're just kind of doing the thing that you said that you weren't going to do. And I've often said that when people talk about, is Christianity going to be dead or this or that, I say, well, it doesn't have to be, but if people persist in saying we can't share that knowledge with people, the regular person can't handle, and maybe some people are not in a spiritual mode. I'm not going to say that they're not up to it, but they're not in a spiritual mode. Maybe that's just not, they haven't developed that spiritual curiosity about something, and so maybe that's why they wouldn't have it. But it's not that people aren't capable of it. And there's a lot of people who have it. Like, I think I might have told this story when I was a child. I've been immersed in this since I was very young. I mean, when I went to church, I was kind of into what was going on at church. I was interested in the whole ritual aspect. I remember being in second grade and taking out books on world religions, and things like that. I mean, I was interested from a very, very young age. And I started having experiences probably what time I was 14 or 15. Some of the ones that I still talk about and carry on about now. And I remember when I had to talk to a priest about these things, and tried to explain to him what was going, he just went, oh, honey, things like that don't happen to people like you. Like, what's your real problem? Like, did you break up with a boyfriend or something? And I'm looking at him like, you're a moron, aren't you? But honestly, though, I don't think this priest knew how to deal with that. I don't think, and it was very frustrating. And the point being that because I had that kind of experience with him, I'm like, well, you're not going to be any help to me. Oh my God, thank you. Yeah, yeah, that was it. I'm like, you're not any help to me. Oops, I'm going to drop my coffee here. I'm like, you're no help. And that's something I've actually said to people. You spend so much time telling people to be afraid of the very thing that would actually help them achieve what taking communion and all that will actually do for you if you're open to that, but you're taught to be closed off to that. Like, that's not for you. And so it's the same kind of thing. This is only for special people. But back to Valis for a minute. It's like, the empire never ended. So if you think about the Roman Empire, they always talk about bread and circuses, right? The idea that people are just distracted by crazy. I mean, that's like, there's reality TV for you, right? Being in the theater with gladiators and stuff, and the amphitheaters and so forth, and people fighting and attacking each other. It's just another version of it. And it's like, if you give people enough bread, if they feel like they have enough, and of course we could argue maybe that's not the case right now, but the idea is that if everybody just and everybody worships the emperor, of course, and if everybody kind of goes into that, and the reason that emperor worship even came into beginning to begin with was because there was all this infighting in the Republican at that time, the Republic, the Senate, the Roman Senate, and so forth. There was sort of a sort of democratic. I mean, it was still hierarchical, but there was still something of a democratic system in place, like you would see in Greece. And eventually, what happens is there was so much civil war going on there that it was like, oh, it's good that we have an emperor now. It's the Roman peace. All the kiss up kind of stuff that was written around the year, between the years like 20 and I forget when Augustus came into power, but I'm thinking of the Aeneid, which was written around 14 BCE, and Virgil actually wanted that burned on his death. I think he was ashamed of it because really, if you read it, it is kind of a suck-up piece to Augustus and the Julius family. So that was the thing. It was the idea that, oh, this is the Roman peace. This is this great thing. But it really it ends up kind of falling into this almost very debauched kind of where people are just kind of feeding a lot of their worst instincts and so forth. And so the whole idea that the empire never ended is the idea that we're almost like in time, we're almost trapped like a prison in that space, and we just keep living the Roman Empire over and over and over again. Interesting idea, depending on how you want to think about that. But yeah, the empire, and I actually do want to go back and reread Valis again because it's been a while since I've read it. But I remember that just really struck me. The empire never ended. You are stuck in this space where you believe that there's nothing outside of that. And the idea is that there is something outside of that. There is a consciousness of something that is bigger than that. And we don't want to just focus our consciousness on maybe what we've done here. And good morning, Sudha. What we've accomplished. We have to recognize that there's something bigger beyond the system that we're in. And I think that's probably too why I'm getting a lot of messages about not being afraid about what's going on right now, in terms of politics and in terms of things like that, is that, yes, there's a lot of stuff that's very, very scary that's going on right now, but there's a lot of people who, I don't know. I mean, I feel like this is not really that new. I feel like for a while now, at least since at least, I don't know, the mid to, I guess when we say 2010s on, I feel like there's been this kind of discontent with the system as it has existed. And for those of you who joined a little later, I'd gotten a message, an Enochian message this morning, that basically translates to the God in Enochian to like the God power gathering and government's aging. So there's this idea, which again, as I mentioned, this is not a full card set I'm working with. So really, it's like trying to communicate with just nouns. But the way that I managed to understand that was that, there's this change that's coming, and the way we're doing things is not the way in which we have done things is now aging, and it's going to change. It has to change at this point. Because really it's kind of, whatever it may started at, it's kind of turning into this thing that's almost becoming like that empire and like that reality show of the Roman Empire. And it's like, okay, I think this is a cycle that has to be broken. That's kind of what I think is coming up here. But we will see. I mean, that's the way I'm feeling this message out. In fact, especially in light of the consciousness card that came up this morning. So, so it's very, very interesting, but the idea of consciousness, being conscious of the fact that there's this bigger system, but also being aware that you can't really apprehend that with your mind. It's just something, again, you have to feel in the body. You feel it through your inner voice. You feel it through your intuition, through your experience, just being out and allowing yourself to feel your other senses to kick in. I probably should some morning talk a little bit about The Black Goddess and the Sixth Sense, which is another book by Peter Redgrove that my friend Ellen lent to me. It's a very hard book to get. I think I saw it, I would go onto A-Books and Amazon. You can't find a copy for less than $250 because it's so rare. But my friend had mentioned it to me because she says, oh yeah, I was in a charity shop in Canterbury and she found it for £2. I was like, oh, they really undersold that one. But but when I saw her in London, she said to me, she gave it to me. She's like, oh, here, take it on a long-term loan. So it is going to go back to her at some point. But I just, I'm very grateful to her because it's a fascinating, mind-blowing kind of book about the way in which we, because he talks about a lot of different phenomena. He talks about the science around a lot of different things, and because he dealt a lot with psychoanalysis and psychotherapy and things, Peter Redgrove, and he talks about the ways in which we manage to. He talks about the ways in which we. He talks a lot about the Oedipus myth and the fact that Oedipus, when he realizes kind of his error, he puts his eyes out. And he feels the symbolism of that is more the idea that, he making the mistake of thinking that everything comes from some sight and everything comes from the mind. But he has kind of a reinterpretation of Oedipus. He doesn't see Oedipus as solving of the riddle of the Sphinx. Another example of what a good boy am I, right? Oh, you did this great thing, now we're going to make you king, But they said all he may have actually did was drive away what we might think of as the feminine impulse in favor of the masculine one, because the Sphinx is a chimeric kind of a being, and that's typically the way you will see certain aspects of the mother as being. It's the idea of Jonah and the whale, the belly of the beast. Actually, no, I'm saying, where did I hear this recently? It was the conference I went to. Somebody was talking about this because it was about imaginative landscapes and water monsters and beings, and a lot of times these chimeric figures represent these unconscious forces that we interact with, and we only know through our engagement, but a lot of times, where the conscious mind is very frightened of it, but it's a matter of learning how to do things in a different way or see things in a different way. And that, I think, is all part of this kind of idea here. So I'm going to put my coffee cup over there. It is quite warm this morning. I'm not going to be looking forward to the rest of this day, in terms of the weather, but, we'll survive this like we do anything else, right? Okay, so let's see. What's our reading for today? What do we need to know? Okay. Okay. So this is interesting. Our central card today is the Eight of Pentacles, which is ordinariness. So this is just about being ordinary, not needing to do anything extraordinary. So we're talking about consciousness. We're talking about this consciousness of the bigger system. But But what's interesting here is, yeah, it does get back to the idea that we don't need to do any. We just need to be ordinary, and that may require perhaps a certain degree of humility. When I think about the story that I was just told about Indra and so forth, it's like, yeah, it's the idea that we're all capable of accomplishing great things, but like I had said the other day about being at that Tiferet point in the Kabbalah, like, you can be on the mountaintop and be able to see the whole picture, but if you start to think, oh, this makes me, more enlightened than other people, or this makes me great, or this makes me obviously qualified to be the leader because I'm smarter than the rest of you, then or this means that I'm so grand, like people have to celebrate me in a big way, then that's when you fall down. So ordinariness is really just kind of about being ordinary, just kind of doing your thing, doing what you want to do. Oftentimes, just you can live in the ordinary life in a very extraordinary kind of a way. It doesn't have to be that you're doing anything super different. You know what I mean? I don't know how else to explain it. You don't have to be, you don't have to be having, visions of angels, and you don't have to be having, these weird altered states or anything. It's just being ordinary. There's a lot that you can gain just from being ordinary. Now, the inner feeling of which we're unaware here is healing. Okay, this is the King of Cups, and or King of Water in this deck, and yeah, so the idea of healing here is just that this suggests that there is a healing that is going on. Now, I see this card a lot for people, and I mean, even if people are not healing from something physically, even if there's not, say, an apparent emotional trauma that somebody's healing from, like maybe your life has been ordinary and just going along and it's fine. But we are still all healing from something that's more collective. And in this healing process, I think that's where a lot of this awareness is going to come in, just by being ordinary and not trying to get involved in a lot of this drama, this kind of created drama that we don't necessarily need to be focused on, And the external feeling of maybe which we are aware is the conditioning card again. This is the Devil card. This is being a lion among sheep. So again, that gets to the idea that of awareness, of being aware that you have much more power than people tell you that you do. You think that you're limited. Oh, there's only this and there's only that, and oh, I have to rely on this person, or this person's going to save us, or that's going to happen. And it's saying no. You've got a lot of power in yourself. There's more to you. Just being an ordinary person with the ordinary senses that you have, that you can do stuff with. But you're kind of taught like that you have to follow somebody else, that you can't do it on your own. You're not capable. Well, you are capable. That's what this is. You're a lion. You're not. You think you're a sheep, but you're actually a lion. And that's the way that card's interpreted there. And I think that's a good way to couch it. Is just like we disenfranchise or disown our own power because we believe, maybe in the name of humility, that we don't have it. But not using the gifts you have is not the same as humility. Humility is just not walking around like, look at me, I'm just so awesome. I mean, there's that puffed up narcissism that we can see in people. That's not the same as self-confidence. That actually usually comes out of a lack of self-confidence when we have that kind of a situation. When somebody has to walk around and tell you they're the greatest all the time. It's generally, I have to laugh. Who was it? It was, actually, it was years and years ago when I was working my first job, my first librarian job. Okay, when I had my library degree, I was working for a network, doing data and stuff, and I had a boss who really got on my nerves because there was somebody who just came in and basically didn't want to let me do my job. Wanted to say that he was smarter than me and he was going to take control of things. And I had complained to my boss about it, and she had basically kind of reamed him out. And then one of our other techs walked by, and my boss was trying to talk to me, and he said to him, he says, "Jim, I'm trying to convince her that I'm a nice guy." And Jim looked at him, he says, "If you have to convince somebody that you're a nice guy," he's like, "I don't know quite how that goes." Which I thought was just really funny, because I think Jim had actually been a minister, and it was just funny that he had said that. He's like, "Yeah, if you gotta convince somebody, gotta wonder about that." Anyway, there's that kind of an energy to it. You don't have to convince anybody. You can just be. You can just be and use your own power. And if people want to be critical or don't like it or whatever, well, if you know what your own power is, and you just kind of say, okay, well, then you don't like it, and you move on, right? Okay. So the advice card, or what we're looking at here, the thing we're focusing on here, again, we have the isolation card, Three of Swords. So Three of Swords has come up a lot lately, and while, again, this is a card of isolation, like breaking out of isolation, again, that is connected to healing, because it's the idea that we are breaking out of a space where we feel sorrowful and feel alone, and recognizing that we are part of this larger system, that we're not alone, that we do have friends, that we do have people who support us, even if we have days where we feel like everybody's like giving us crap for no reason. This is saying, no, you're not unsupported, you're not alone. But at the same time, I'm often feeling like the Three of Swords is showing up recently, because just kind of like we saw the control card the other day, I said there's a flip side to that, which may say that there may be a need to separate from certain people or situations in our lives. And again, that's all very individual, that maybe are holding us back, or making us think that, we're sheep, that we don't have the power. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to, hate somebody and delete their phone number or whatever, but we may just say, you know what, I'm stepping back and I'm disengaging from this, because it's not, because especially if you end up getting caught up in the maelstrom of whatever that drama is, and if you're saying, well, that's not helpful in where I need to be, then you might walk away from it. And the outcome is the Ten of Wands, the suppression card, okay? And as you can see, there's this person, it's like all this pent-up energy that needs to come out. And I feel that kind of fits in with what I've been seeing lately. I feel like there's a lot of people who are, again, I mentioned that this seems to be a time where people feel like either very drained and heavy, or very challenged in a lot of ways. And I don't know, like I said, if you live in the area that I live in, weather could be part of it. It's definitely going to become very oppressive. But I feel like it's more, Ten of Wands is often about somebody carrying a huge burden and needing to drop it. Getting to the point where you're going to lay that burden down and say, okay, you know what, I don't need to carry this anymore. If we go back to the myth of Indra that I was talking about, and the idea that he's trying to build his palace, it's bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, until somebody finally tells him, like, look, and how all the Indras before him became, turned into ants, and things like that. It was, the idea is that, yeah, you think, what a good boy am I, and then you fall down. And so in a way, that's almost the idea of, yeah, you don't need to carry the world on your shoulders. It's not just you. It's not, this isn't your, it's not all about you, and it's not all on your shoulders. So you can, there's certain things you can drop, you can let go. There will be other people to pick up the slack. Back to our wave and ocean metaphor, right? You have the force of the ocean. That's where your power really comes from, is that you're not alone, and you don't have to make it all happen by yourself. So very interesting here. So there's the idea, I feel like, of just trying to kind of continue to be ordinary, to do the things that you do every day, the way that you want to do them, engaging with your own senses, trusting yourself, trusting your own strength, trusting that there's a healing process that's going on, disconnecting from anything that you feel is draining you of that kind of thing, of draining you of your energy in some way, or making you feel that you are not capable in some way. And then, of course, suppression also, this card can also be about just, a lot of people have been expressions of just sudden rage, or of certain things that have gone on. I know I've had some moments where I can't say that I've expressed rage at people. Maybe I've expressed it privately, but not, there's the thought and then there's the action, right? But the idea that still you need some kind of a safe outlet for energy, and then so that you can, decompress, heal, and kind of put some of this stuff down. So this is what we have here from from this reading. I feel like there's something that's kind of being pushed to a crescendo till we get to a point where we finally just say, okay, that can happen, actually. I don't want to. We're kind of late in the live stream, so I don't want to get into stories. But I am reminded of the time that I was writing my master's thesis, and my dissertation, thesis director was somebody who was a real. She was very flaky. I mean, I'm just going to say it. She was just very. She was actually a brilliant woman, very interesting lecturer, knew a lot of good stuff, was a good psychoanalyst, was a student of Erik Erikson. Okay, the developmental psychology. Sorry, we had a disconnect there for a minute. She actually lived with Erik Erikson and his wife Joan as his understudy. So she's a brilliant woman, but when it came to doing anything, she was flaky. So anyway, she didn't read my master's thesis until 5 days before the deadline, even though she told me all the time, it looks great, keep going. And then turns out she never read it. So I had to call the office, and I had 6 weeks to redo all of my master's thesis research if I wanted to graduate. And I was just, I had a job, I had other things, I had a marriage that wasn't going so well. It was just like, it was, and everything just collapsed at the same time. One of my best friend's fathers, he died, he was very young, he was probably the age I'm at now. Another friend, called me because literally her whole house was destroyed by a flood from somebody in another unit. It, literally, everything just collapsed at the same time. And I'm not even going to talk about what was going on in my marriage at that point, but that was the first time we talked about divorce. And I remember having to go downstairs. I opened my laptop because I was going to sit down and start working on the rewrite of my thesis. And I just remember I closed my laptop, got in my car, and went out and got ice cream because I was like, I give up. I give up. I give up. What am I going to do? So I don't know. I feel like sometimes a lot of things can put pressure on us because they're pushing us to the point of giving up. And when you give up, it's just eventually everything gets done, but it's not done in a way where we always feel like, how we always have to be busy. I have to have this piece in control. I have to have this here. I have to have this here. And sometimes it's just like we start juggling and balancing so many things that really we're spending all this time kind of having this facade of control when we really just need to kind of let things flow. I did eventually finish and get through the thesis, and it actually was kind of a horrible process because anyway, I won't get into that right now, but my doctoral work went so much better. Normally it doesn't work like that, but my doctoral work was phenomenal. It was night and day in terms of how that went. But anyway, I did pull one more card from our essential oil oracle. And it's interesting that I have the card Calming that's come up. This is Calming Oil, okay? And the message is acceptance. And the trigger statement is, I cannot trust anyone. Back to the 10 of Wands. I have to do it all myself. I can't trust anybody. It's got to be all on me. The true statement, everyone deserves my love. Or just maybe everyone deserves a chance to do their part. If you want to look at it that way. It says, I open my heart to heal and release. I open myself to peace of divine love and grace. So yeah, again, that gets back to the idea of vulnerability. Being able to open your mind, heart, even, like I said, even when people don't do the things that you want them to do, and even if certain things don't get done, sometimes it's not just a matter of, well, now I got to come in and fix it myself. Sometimes it's just a matter of, letting things go into the flow. I've had several instances this week where I feel like, oh my gosh, I have to take action on this and this and this, but I just didn't take action. And then all of a sudden, something would pop up in my email or my feeds or my text, and it's like, oh, hey, by the way, can you do the thing I was thinking about doing for somebody? They're like, oh, hey, can you do this for me? I didn't even have to ask them; they asked me. Things just sometimes just kind of sort themselves up and pop up. So, yeah. Anyway, just kind of another interesting thought to kind of finish with. So I'm going to, after this, I'm going to be having a day doing Reiki and relaxing. I do have a couple errands I have to run, but it is going to be hot. I'm going to stay inside and rest because if you weren't here at the beginning, I've injured my back and everything else, working outside yesterday. My hands are absolutely killing me from pulling weeds for over 2 hours. It was just, so now I'm just gonna kind of, I'm going to work on some stuff, but I'm going to basically stay in and decompress today. Another quick note, don't forget I have the dream analysis class if anybody's interested in that. That's actually a really good deal. I'm just kind of doing this more introductory to get people into the sphere of the kind of online workshops that I'm offering, but it's only $20 for 2 hours, which is insanely cheap, but I want to just kind of offer something. It is going to be an overview. We're not going to get, we're going to kind of cover a lot of different things, but and then do some practical workshopping with it in the last hour. But yeah, so if you're interested in that class, it's by Zoom. It's on a Saturday afternoon, 29th, from 2 to 4 p.m. my time. So if it interests you, definitely check it out. I have it in my stories here. I actually have the link to the registration for that, or just go to transitionlifecoaching.net and under events, it should be under there. Thanks you guys so much for watching. It's always a pleasure to have you here. I hope you have a great rest of your Tuesday, and I'll be here tomorrow. Take care.